The massive transport shuttle's engines whined to a stop as it settled onto the crystalline landing pad of the Galactic Military Academy. Through the viewport, Cadet Kim Taho could see the towering spires that reached toward the twin suns of Kepler 442b. The Academy looked nothing like the military bases back on Earth. Everything here seemed to glow with an inner light, as if the very buildings were alive. Taho adjusted his simple gray uniform one last time before the shuttle doors hissed open. The moment he stepped outside, he felt the weight of dozens of alien eyes watching him. He had trained for this moment for 3 years, but nothing could prepare him for the reality of being the only human among so many different species. The reception committee waited at the base of the shuttle ramp. 3 senior cadets stood in formation, each representing a different corner of the galaxy. The first was Velnox, whose chitinous exoskeleton gleamed like polished black metal. His compound eyes reflected the sunlight in thousands of tiny rainbows, and his mandibles clicked together in what Taho hoped was a friendly greeting. The cadet had studied enough alien biology to know that with insectoids, you could never be completely sure. Standing beside Velnox was perhaps the most beautiful being Taho had ever seen. Thyron appeared to be carved from living crystal, her translucent form catching and bending the starlight into dancing patterns across the landing pad. When she moved, tiny musical notes seemed to chime in the air around her. Taho wondered if that was how her species communicated or simply a side effect of her crystalline structure. The third member of the committee was impossible to miss. Gormath stood nearly 3 meters tall on 4 thick legs, his rocky hide marked with scars that spoke of countless battles and training exercises. His species, the Vortak, were known throughout the galaxy as natural warriors. Just looking at him made Taho feel incredibly small and fragile. As Taho approached the group, he caught fragments of their conversation in Galactic Standard, a language he had studied intensively but still struggled with. "So this is the human," Velnox chittered, his mandibles creating a sound like breaking twigs. "Intelligence reports classify them as classy durability. Look at that soft skin, no natural armor, no redundant organs visible from the outside." Thyron's crystalline head tilted as she examined Taho with what might have been curiosity. "They seem so fragile. Are we certain they can survive the basic training protocols?" Gormath rumbled something in his deep voice that Taho's translator couldn't quite catch, but the tone suggested skepticism. Taho pretended not to understand their whispered observations, keeping his face neutral as he had been trained. Let them underestimate humans. His instructors had said it might prove useful later. Before the conversation could continue, a shadow fell across the landing pad. Academy Commander Zethral approached with measured steps, his towering reptilian form commanding immediate attention. His scales shifted color slightly in the sunlight, and his forked tongue tasted the air as he walked. Everything about him spoke of ancient predatory instincts refined by military discipline. "Welcome to Galactic Military Academy, Cadet Taho," Commander Zethral said in perfect English, though his accent made the word sound like controlled hiss. "I trust your journey was satisfactory." "Yes, sir. Thank you for this opportunity," Taho replied, snapping to attention with the crisp precision that had been drilled into him during his training on Earth. The commander's vertical pupils studied him for a moment before nodding approvingly. "Follow me. Your orientation begins immediately." As they walked through the academy grounds, Taho marveled at the diversity of students around him. Beings of energy floated past, their forms barely contained within specialized suits. Creatures that looked like living plants photosynthesized in the sunlight while studying holographic displays. A group of what appeared to be sentient geometric shapes rolled across the courtyard in perfect formation. In the main assembly hall, Commander Zethral began the orientation briefing. The hall itself was a marvel of engineering, with gravity fields adjusted for each species' needs. Some cadets floated near the ceiling, others clung to specially textured walls, and a few rested in pools of liquid that somehow remained contained in midair. "The purpose of this academy," Commander Zethral explained, his voice carrying clearly through the hall's acoustic systems, "is to train the galaxy's finest military minds in preparation for threats that extend beyond individual worlds. Each species that joins our ranks brings unique advantages to the collective defense of our galaxy." He gestured toward different sections of the assembled cadets as he spoke. The Krillians possess natural armor plating that can deflect most energy weapons. The ethereals can phase through solid matter, making them ideal for reconnaissance and infiltration. The Vortak have incredible physical strength and endurance. The commander continued listing the advantages of various species, each description making Teho feel smaller and less capable. He watched as the alien cadets nodded with obvious pride when their abilities were mentioned. Finally, all eyes in the hall turned toward him. The weight of their attention was almost crushing. Thyron's voice chimed like crystal bells as she asked a question that hung in the air. "And humans, Commander? What advantages do they bring?" Commander Zevral paused, his reptilian features unreadable. For a long moment, the only sound in the hall was the gentle humming of the life support systems maintaining atmosphere for dozens of different species. "Humans," he said finally, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air, "are adaptable." The word hung in the silence that followed, seeming almost inadequate compared to the impressive abilities that had been described for other species. Teho felt heat rise in his cheeks, but he kept his expression neutral. Around the hall, he could see some of the alien cadets exchanging glances that clearly conveyed their doubts about this new addition to their ranks. The training facility buzzed with nervous energy as the cadets prepared for their first live combat simulation. After 3 weeks of basic drills and classroom instruction, today would be their first real test. Teho checked his plasma rifle one final time, making sure the safety indicators showed the familiar green glow that meant training mode was active. A week earlier, the Academy had received its second human cadet. Lee Soo-jin had arrived with the same quiet determination that seemed to mark all humans, though she smiled more easily than Teho, where he was serious and focused. She brought a lightness that even some of the alien cadets had begun to appreciate. Her laugh had a musical quality that reminded Thyron of her own crystalline chimes. "Ready for this?" Soo-jin asked as she adjusted her protective vest. The standard Academy armor looked bulky on her smaller human frame, but she wore it with the same casual confidence she brought to everything else. "As ready as we can be," Teho replied, though privately he wondered how 2 humans would fare against the natural advantages their alien classmates possessed. They had been placed on the same squad for the exercise, along with Velnox and 2 other cadets from species he was still learning to identify. The simulation chamber transformed before their eyes, walls rising and reshaping themselves to create a complex urban environment. Buildings appeared as if by magic, complete with windows, doorways, and perfect hiding spots for enemy forces. The technology still amazed Teho, even after 3 weeks at the Academy. Commander Zethral's voice echoed through the chamber speakers. "Your mission is simple. Alpha Squad will defend the central command post. Beta Squad will attempt to capture it. You have 30 minutes. Remember, these are training weapons only, calibrated for safe stunning effects. Begin." The battle started immediately. Plasma bolts filled the air like deadly fireworks, though Teho knew they were set to the lowest possible settings. Still, getting hit would knock a cadet unconscious for several minutes, effectively removing them from the exercise. Soo-jin moved with surprising grace through the simulated streets, her smaller size allowing her to take cover behind obstacles that wouldn't protect the larger alien cadets. She provided covering fire while Teho advanced toward the command post, their teamwork already showing signs of the coordination they had practiced during basic drills. "Nice shot," Teho called out as Soo-jin's plasma bolt took down one of the defending cadets, a large amphibian whose species he couldn't pronounce. The alien dropped to the ground, stunned but clearly breathing normally. The exercise was going well. Despite their supposed disadvantages, the human cadets were holding their own against species with natural armor and enhanced reflexes. Teho felt a surge of pride as he realized they might actually have a chance of completing their mission. That was when everything went wrong. A sound like thunder filled the simulation chamber. Teho turned just in time to see a blast of energy, so bright it hurt to look at directly. The plasma bolt that emerged from Velnox's rifle was wrong in every possible way. Instead of the gentle blue glow of training weapons, this was a searing white beam that seemed to tear through the air itself. The bolt struck Soo-jin's center mass. Her protective vest, designed to absorb the gentle training pulses, offered no resistance against a full military-grade plasma discharge. The energy punched through the armor like it was made of paper, carving a smoking crater in her chest. The smell of burned flesh and melted plastic filled the air. Sujin's eyes went wide with shock and pain. She looked down at the massive wound in her torso, her expression more surprised than afraid. For one terrible moment, she remained standing, as if her body hadn't yet realized what had happened to it. Then she collapsed. Her body hit the ground hard, convulsing once before going completely still. The cheerful musical laugh that had brightened the past week was replaced by absolute silence. Emergency sirens began wailing immediately. The simulation chamber's walls retracted, and medical drones swarmed into the area like mechanical vultures. Their scanners swept over Sujin's motionless form, searching for any sign of life. "Vital signs negative," announced the lead medical drone in a voice devoid of emotion. "Cardiac function has ceased. Neural activity shows no response. Initiating emergency protocols." More drones arrived, their mechanical arms extending sensors and medical equipment. The readings they displayed on floating holographic screens told a story that made Tejo's blood turn to ice. Cardiac arrest confirmed. The drone continued its clinical report. Massive tissue damage to vital organs. Neural activity has ceased completely. Subject is deceased. The words hit the assembled cadets like physical blows. Velnox, whose weapon had malfunctioned, stood frozen in horror, his compound eyes reflecting the emergency lights in thousands of tiny fragments. His mandibles clicked uncontrollably as he stared at his plasma rifle, unable to comprehend how the safety systems had failed so catastrophically. Thyron's crystalline form had lost all its usual brightness, dulling to a lifeless gray that matched the color of old stone. The musical chimes that usually surrounded her had fallen silent, as if her very essence was mourning the loss of life. Even Gormath, whose species was known for their stoic nature in the face of death, rumbled deep in his throat with what could only be described as distress. His rocky hide seemed to darken, and his massive frame shook slightly as he processed what had just happened. They had all witnessed death before. In a galaxy filled with dangerous worlds and hostile species, mortality was a constant companion. But this was different. Just moments ago, Sujin had been alive, laughing, fighting alongside them. She had been part of their strange little family of cadets from across the galaxy. Now she was gone, killed by a training accident that should have been impossible. The medical bay of the Galactic Military Academy was a place of sterile white surfaces and humming machines. Dr. Yadera, the chief medical officer, stood at her workstation with her 8 tentacles moving in careful patterns as she dictated her incident report. Her species, the Kethani, were known throughout the galaxy for their medical expertise, and she had seen many types of injuries in her long career. Training accident, plasma weapon malfunction. She spoke into her recording device, her voice carrying the weight of sadness that came with documenting a young life lost. Human female, age 21 standard years. Massive trauma to chest cavity resulting in immediate cardiac arrest and complete neural shutdown. Time of death recorded as 1407 hours, Academy Standard Time. Behind her, covered by a simple thermal sheet, lay the body of Cadet Lee Sujin. The medical drones had finished their work and powered down, their job complete. There was nothing more they could do. Death was final, even in an age of advanced galactic medicine. Dr. Yathera paused in her dictation, her tentacles curling with emotion. In all her years of practice, she had never grown used to losing patients, especially one so young. The human had shown such promise during her brief time at the academy. Her laughter had brightened the medical bay during her routine health checks, and she had asked endless curious questions about alien biology. The doctor was about to continue her report when a sound froze her in place. It was soft at first, barely audible above the hum of the medical equipment. A sharp intake of breath, like someone gasping for air after being underwater too long. Every head in the medical bay turned toward the examination table. The thermal sheet rose and fell slightly, as if something underneath was breathing. But that was impossible. The medical scanners had confirmed death 17 minutes and 43 seconds ago. Then Sujin's eyes snapped open. Not the slow, confused opening of someone waking from unconsciousness, but the sudden, sharp awareness of someone fighting their way back from somewhere very dark and very far away. Her eyes were bright and alert, though they showed traces of pain that made the watching alien step back in shock. The medical drones around the bay suddenly burst back into activity. Their sensors, which had been reading nothing but empty space where life signs should be, now detected the impossible return of vital signs. Heart rate, brain activity, cellular function, all the markers of life that had been absent were suddenly there again, as if they had never left. Sujin coughed violently, a harsh sound that echoed off the medical bay's walls. Dark fluid came up from her lungs, the remains of blood, and other fluids that had pooled there during her time of death. She coughed again, clearing her airways, then slowly and carefully pushed herself up to a sitting position on the examination table. The massive wound in her chest was still there. The plasma bolt had carved out a crater of burned flesh and exposed tissue that should have killed any living being instantly. Yet somehow, impossibly, she was alive and conscious despite injuries that defied every law of biology the gathered aliens understood. Did someone get the number of that hover tank? Sujin asked, her voice rough and hoarse from her ordeal. Despite the obvious pain she was in, there was something in her tone that the aliens were beginning to recognize as distinctly human. She was making jokes about her own death, finding humor in a situation that should have been nothing but terror and agony. Vel Knox, who had been standing near the wall in horrified silence since the accident, began clicking his mandibles uncontrollably. The sound filled the medical bay like castanets, a nervous habit his species displayed when faced with things they couldn't understand. His compound eyes reflected the medical bay's lights in thousands of tiny fragments, each one showing his confusion and fear. Thyron's crystalline form, usually a steady blue-white glow, began flickering between colors like a broken light display. Blues shifted to reds, then to purples, then to colors that had no names in any known language. Among her people, such rapid color changes indicated deep emotional distress, as if her very essence was struggling to process what she was witnessing. Dr. Yathera's tentacles writhed in complex patterns that would have been recognized by any member of her species as signs of extreme agitation. Her medical training, built over decades of study and practice, was telling her that what she was seeing was completely impossible. "This should not be possible," she whispered, her translation device working overtime to convert the complex emotional undertones in her native language. "Your cardiac muscle was destroyed. I saw the scans myself. Your neural pathways showed complete cessation of activity for over 17 minutes. By every measure of medical science known to this galaxy, you should be dead." Sujin looked down at the gaping wound in her chest with the same clinical detachment a doctor might use to examine a particularly interesting case study. She could see her own internal organs damaged and burned, yet somehow still functioning enough to keep her alive. "Well, it certainly hurts like hell," she said matter-of-factly, then looked up at the gathering crowd of alien medical staff and cadets who had rushed to witness this impossible event. "Anyone got a medical kit? And maybe something for the pain? I have a feeling this is going to be a long recovery." The medical bay erupted into controlled chaos as Dr. Yathera shouted orders to her staff. Every scanner in the facility was redirected toward the human. Every sensor focused on understanding how someone could return from clinical death with such casual determination. What they found would change everything they thought they knew about the species called humanity. News of what happened in the medical bay spread to the Galactic Military Academy faster than light-speed communications. Within 6 hours, transport ships were arriving from across the sector, carrying scientists and researchers who had dropped everything to witness the impossible human who had returned from death. The Academy's guest quarters, normally quiet except during graduation ceremonies, suddenly buzzed with activity as some of the galaxy's most brilliant minds gathered to study a phenomenon that challenged everything they thought they knew about life and death. Professor Kethmos arrived on the third transport ship. He was a tall, thin being whose gray skin seemed to shimmer with intelligence. His species, the Valdorians, had been studying the mysteries of life for thousands of years, and their scientific method was respected throughout the known galaxy. If anyone could explain what had happened to the human, it would be him. Sujin sat patiently in the medical bay, still wearing a hospital gown that barely covered the extensive bandages wrapped around her torso. She had been poked, prodded, scanned, and examined by more alien doctors than she could count, but her sense of humor remained intact. "With your permission, Cadet Park," Professor Ketmo said as he entered the room, his voice carrying the formal tone that academics use when requesting cooperation. "We would like to conduct a comprehensive study of human physiology." Sue Jean raised an eyebrow at the name Error. After a week of corrections, she had learned that many alien species had trouble with human naming conventions. "It's Lee, actually. Lee Sue Jean," she said with the same patient tone she had used dozens of times already. "And sure, Professor, just try not to kill me again. Once was enough for this lifetime." The research team that assembled around her was unlike anything the Academy had ever seen. Specialists in cellular biology worked alongside experts in neural function, while psychologists observed her behavior patterns and linguists analyzed the way she spoke about her experience. What they discovered in the following days shocked everyone involved. Professor Kethmo stood before a room full of researchers, his usually calm demeanor showing signs of excitement that his species rarely displayed in public. Behind him, holographic displays showed data that seemed impossible to believe. "Colleagues," he began, his voice carrying across the packed auditorium, "we have been operating under a fundamental misunderstanding about the human species. Earth is not the peaceful garden world we assumed it to be." The display behind him shifted to show a blue-green planet that looked deceptively beautiful from space. But as the image zoomed in, the reality became clear. Massive storms swirled across continents, earthquakes split the ground, and volcanic eruptions painted the sky with ash and fire. Earth is classified as a classic sci death world. Professor Kethmos continued, his words causing murmurs of disbelief throughout the audience. "This is a planet so hostile that only the most adaptable species could possibly evolve there. Look at these atmospheric readings." Numbers appeared on the display that made several alien researchers gasp in shock. Oxygen levels that would be toxic to most galactic species. Temperature variations that range from freezing to boiling within the same planetary cycle. Natural disasters occur with devastating regularity. And the predators. The display showed creatures that seemed designed specifically for hunting and killing. Massive cats with teeth like daggers, pack hunters that could run for days without stopping, and ocean dwellers that could swallow a small spacecraft whole. "Every single day on Earth is a survival test," the professor explained. "Humans evolved not in peace, but in constant conflict with their environment and with each other." Dr. Yathera stepped forward to present her medical findings. Her tentacles moved in patterns of scientific excitement as she shared data that had kept her awake for 3 straight days. "Human biology shows redundancy that we have never seen before," she announced, her translation device working to convey her amazement. "They have backup systems for critical functions that most species don't even know are possible. Their hearts can restart themselves after stopping. Their brains can reroute around damaged areas in minutes instead of months." She paused, looking at the data as if she still couldn't believe it herself. "Their cellular repair mechanisms continue working even after what we would consider clinical death. And this chemical compound they produce called adrenaline can temporarily increase their strength, speed, and pain tolerance to levels that exceed their normal capabilities by several 100%. But it was Dr. Zurgoff, the Academy's chief psychologist, who presented the most disturbing findings. His species, the Mindari, were natural telepaths who could read the emotional states of most galactic races, but humans had puzzled him from the moment they arrived at the Academy. "The psychological evaluation of humans reveals something we have never encountered before," Dr. Zurgoff said, his mental projections creating images that the assembled researchers could feel as well as see. "Most species, when faced with overwhelming odds, will surrender to preserve what life remains. This is logical survival behavior." He paused, his telepathic abilities picking up confusion and concern from his audience. "Humans possess what they call spite," he continued. "When faced with impossible odds, rather than accepting defeat, they become more determined to survive. They will literally refuse to die out of pure stubbornness." Cadet Lee Soo Jean did not return from death because of superior biology alone. She returned because she was angry about dying and decided she wasn't ready to accept it. The auditorium fell silent as the implications of this revelation sank in. Somewhere in the galaxy was an entire species that had been forged by constant struggle, shaped by adversity, and programmed by evolution to never give up, no matter how hopeless their situation became. As the researchers looked at their data, one thought occurred to all of them simultaneously. They had seriously underestimated what humans were capable of. The morning of graduation day arrived with the twin sons of Kepler, 442b casting long shadows across the academy grounds. In the administrative offices, clerks worked frantically to update records that had remained unchanged for 3 centuries. The Galactic Military Academy's classification system, a carefully organized method of categorizing species by their natural abilities, was undergoing its first major revision since its creation. Humans, who had arrived 6 months ago listed as Class C durability species, were now being moved to an entirely new category that had been created specifically for them, Class A persistent species. The change required new forms, new training protocols, and new safety measures that took into account what researchers were calling the human factor. In her dormitory room, Sue Jean stood before a mirror, adjusting her dress uniform for the last time as a cadet. The network of pale scars that crossed her chest was visible through the open collar, a permanent reminder of the day she had died and decided to come back anyway. The scars had faded from angry red to silvery white over the past months, but they would never disappear completely. She didn't mind. If anything, she wore them with a quiet pride that her alien classmates had come to recognize as distinctly human. Each mark told a story of survival against impossible odds, and humans seemed to collect such stories the way other species collected medals or trophies. Down the hall, Tejo was polishing the new insignia on his uniform collar. The symbol of squad leader had been earned not through any single dramatic moment, but through countless small demonstrations of his refusal to quit when things got difficult. When other cadets would give up during training exercises, Tejo would keep going. When missions seemed impossible, he would find a way to complete them anyway. His alien classmates had initially seen this as stubbornness or perhaps a lack of intelligence. How could he not see that the situation was hopeless? It had taken them months to understand that humans simply didn't accept the concept of hopeless. To them, there was always another option, always one more thing to try, always a reason to keep fighting. The Academy's Great Hall had been transformed for the graduation ceremony. Representatives from dozens of species filled the crystalline amphitheater, their varied forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes that boggled the human eye. Floating energy beings shared space with rock-like creatures, while insectoid delegates clicked their mandibles in conversation with beings that looked like living plants. At the center of it all, Commander Zethral stood at the podium, his reptilian form commanding attention through sheer presence. His scales had been polished to a mirror shine for the ceremony, and his uniform bore decorations from conflicts across the galaxy. Today marks a significant moment in the history of this academy, Commander Zethral began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall's acoustic systems. We graduate not just soldiers, but explorers who will venture into the unknown regions of space, carrying with them the knowledge and training they've received here. The graduating class stood in formation before him, each species grouped according to their traditional customs. The humans stood with military precision learned from their own world's armies, while their alien classmates displayed the ceremonial postures of their respective peoples. You will face dangers we cannot imagine, the commander continued, his forked tongue tasting the air as he spoke. Challenges that will test every aspect of your training, every limit of your courage, every boundary of your determination. His vertical pupils swept across the assembled cadets before settling on the small group of humans. Some of you possess natural armor that can deflect energy weapons. Others can phase through solid matter or manipulate the forces of physics themselves. These are remarkable abilities that will serve you well in the trials ahead. He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. But all of you have learned something during your time here that may prove even more valuable. You have learned from our human cadets that survival is not about avoiding death, but about refusing to accept it. A murmur ran through the alien delegates as they processed this concept. For most galactic species, death was the ultimate boundary, the final limit that could not be crossed. The idea that it could be simply refused, rejected through sheer force of will, was revolutionary. The ceremony moved through its traditional phases, with cadets receiving their assignments to various military units across the galaxy. When Sue Jean's name was called, she walked to the podium with the same calm confidence she had shown on her first day at the academy. Commander Zethral held up a crystalline medal that caught the light and threw rainbows across the hall. "The Galactic Medal of Tenacity," he announced, awarded for first time to Cadet Lee Sujin for demonstrating that the boundaries of survival are limited only by one's willingness to accept them. As Sujin accepted the medal, she looked out at the sea of alien faces watching her. Compound eyes reflected the ceremony's lights, energy beings pulsed with colors of respect, and crystalline forms chimed in harmonious approval. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice carrying to every corner of the great hall. "Though I should mention, what you call impossible, we just called Tuesday back on Earth." The comment drew what passed for laughter among the various species, though each expressed amusement in their own unique way. But beneath the humor, there was a deeper understanding. The alien cadets had spent 6 months learning that humans were not just another species to be cataloged and understood. They were something entirely new in the galaxy's experience, a people who had been shaped by constant struggle, forged in adversity, and programmed by millions of years of evolution to never, ever give up. In a universe full of species that had evolved on peaceful worlds under gentle suns, humanity represented something both wonderful and terrifying. They were survivors in the purest sense of the word, and they were about to take their place among the stars.